Okay, so we left off with Jack and Circe stopping at the fork in the road where the woman in red said that they needed to go left and figure out which way to go after there. There'd be more directions after they went left. So they turned left and they went down a little bit and they stopped, pulled over, and Jack went in the back, lifted up the tarp, said, "Well, we have reached your fork in the road, and now we need more directions on which way to go."
So they need to wake up her.
Well, she's already awake. It's been a day or so,
Yeah.
she's been awake and gone back to sleep and waking up again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She just stays asleep. She's sleeping beauty.
She sleeps a lot.
Yeah.
So Jack goes back and says, we need some directions. We need to know which way to go." And she looks at him and says, "You need to follow down the road, and you're going to come to a small town. At this small town, tell the guard that, let's see,
Blah blah blah.
no. So you're going to come to a small town, and at this town, I need you to tell the people who greet you that you are delivering their queen." And he said, "Well, that sounds a little strange, but you did agree to pay us, and you did agree to feed us. So we'll play along. We'll see how it goes." So,
What if the queen's always there?
I don't know. So, Jack gets back in the front, tells Circe the plan. They follow on down the road. She said it's going to be about another day and a half's travel. So, they travel down the road.
They travel. Come on, Gabby's foot.
They stop for the night. They pull over. They make camp. And nothing happens in the middle of the night. They're not visited by any sprigs. They're not visited by any bandits. No one shows up.
They just go to bed.
And it's a dark night.
Do they
So-
go sleepy?
They are sleepy, and they go to sleep.
Is
So,
there any noises?
nope, they are safe. They're in the woods by themselves on the side of the road, and no one bothers them.
Is there going to be a magical mystical tree?
No, not this time. So in the morning, they pack up their stuff, and they talk amongst themselves about how it's strange that the woman in the back of the wagon hasn't really made much conversation with them. Hasn't really interacted with them at all. Has stayed by herself in the back of the wagon. Hasn't come out to camp with them. Hasn't talked to them. Has just stayed to herself. It's a little strange.
Isn't it anyone very much?
No? So, they get back in the front, and they start traveling. So, they make it to a town. They see it coming in the distance, just like they were told on the second day. So,
She knows a lot.
yeah, so they pull up, and there's people walking around doing their thing. People aren't really paying too much attention. There's a person yelling that they're selling pickles in a jar, trying to get people to buy their pickles
In a jar.
in a jar.
Has to be
The
in
jar
the
and the
pickles.
pickles are just pickles.
Yes, all of it.
Don't really like pickles.
So they pull in,
No one cares.
and they yell back. "So, where should we go? We're here."
Asshole.
And suddenly she jumps out of the back of the wagon and starts running down the street. Jack stops the wagon. They both look at each other, and they give chase, running after her. She's not particularly fast. Circe's not very fast either. Jack is much faster.
Yeah.
And he runs into her quickly and tackles her to the ground. She screams.
Is Jack the small one?
Jack is the smaller one. The smaller and younger one. She screams.
That's orange.
And people look around. They see her. And then people start to come over to the commotion. They start looking into what Jack is doing and who this woman is. And a couple people recognize her. And they say, "Hey, that is Jill."
Like Jack and Jill.
Like Jack and Jill. And Jack's sitting there, holding Jill to the ground. He looks around and he says, "So, who's Jill?" Now, these people, they don't look very happy. They're pointing and they're whispering.
Are they mad?
Circi gets over to them at this point, and he can see what's going on. He pushes people back, makes sure to give Jack and Jill a little room. And he says, "Jill, why are these people talking about you like this? They don't seem very happy." She said, "Well, I may have stolen some of their things.
You're a thief.
And they may be angry about that."
Maybe. I'm not quite sure yet.
Circi looks down and says, "Jill, are you a thief? Did you steal these people's
She just
things?"
admitted to it.
Jill looks up and says, "There is a possibility that is true."
Yeah.
Circi looks at her and looks at the people and says, "Well, if that's true, you are a thief.
No.
And I told you I'd get you where you needed to go. Is this where you're going?" Seeing her predicament, and having been thwarted in her escape, she thinks it over and says, "You know, I think maybe I might be better off traveling with you." They consider it. And they say, "Okay then. I need you to get back in the wagon." So she starts making her way back to the wagon. Now the townspeople, they're not too happy with this. This is the person that has stolen their stuff, and apparently she is a prisoner. She was meant to be moved from one jail to another after having been sentenced for her crimes and a thief. So, one of them yells out and says, "You can't let her go."
Why not?
Jack looks back and says, "I'm not letting her go. We're transporting her to the prison. That's what we were hired to do, and that's where we're going. That's what this wagon is. It's a prisoner transport." Oh. Once they realize that she's been recaught, they disperse and go back to their business, nodding along that justice has been done.
Justice has not been done.
They get into the front of the wagon and start moving, and Jake whispers back into the cart, "So, how do we get out of here?"
Jake, who's Jake? Maybe say Jack.
Jack whispers back into the wagon, "How do we get out of here? Unless you want to go to the prison." She says, No, that will be just fine. But at the market here, you want to take a left, follow the road down a couple blocks, take another left, and this will take you out into the fields. From the fields, you can travel through, and that will lead you back out of town. I said, "Well, where does that lead? Where do we go from here?" She said, "Honestly, I was just coming back here to meet up with my family. But it appears that I am not welcome here. So I'll be traveling with you if that's okay. Or you could just let me off outside of town and I'll make my own way." They think about it. And they decide that if she doesn't have any place to go, as long as she doesn't betray them, she can stay.
I thought they would say that.
So they make their way over to the market, take a left, go down a couple blocks, take another left, and make their way through the fields of crops, out of the town and into the woods, along another path. They said, well, where does this road lead? Well, there's roads going all over the place.
Yeah.
So where does this road lead? She said, well, it leads to a much larger city on the bay.
Oh.
How many people did she rob there?
We're not sure. It's going to take a day's travel to get there. And it's a larger city next to the ocean. So, they head on down the road.
They can have a beach day there.
They could have a beach there. So, as they're making their way down the road, they've been traveling a couple hours outside of the town. Luckily, no one bothered them on their way out, which was very fortunate. And it doesn't appear that anyone really paid attention to what they were doing after they got her back into the wagon where people couldn't see her. So, a couple hours into this, they see a man standing in the road. As they get closer, they realize he's not moving. He's wearing leather, and he has a hat with a feather in it. A large peacock feather.
Maybe a scarecrow.
So, they pull up in front of him. Circe calls out, "Who goes there? Why are you in the road? You should move before you get trampled." Well, the man doesn't move.
He gets strangled.
So, Circe gets down, starts walking towards the man. And no sooner has he crossed the horses, that Jack yells out, "Stop! Wait!" And Circe feels the point of a blade in his back. At that point, several other robbers step out from the woods. And they say, "We've heard tell that this wagon contains a friend of ours. We would like her back."
Then take her. We only want her that much.
Jill peels back the tarp just a little bit to see and recognizes the people who claim to be her friends. She says, "These people are part of a rival gang and are not my friends. They mean to kill me." Jack relays this information to Circe. So Jill says that they're not with her. They're here to hurt her.
Who are they using to talk here?
That was Jack. So the lead bandit, the one with the plume in his hair, or the one with the plume in his hat, looks to Circe, who's standing a few paces away from him, and says, "Well, you can either hand her over to us, or we can take her. It's up to you." Thinking about his predicament, the fact that he has a sword to his back and that he's outnumbered 3-1, he thinks to himself and says, "Well, I don't think we have much choice, Jack. Then we better turn her over."
Then she's gonna get killed.
You hear a little squeak from the back of the wagon.
No.
And so she says, "Let me go untie her, and I'll bring her out."
He's got me in the ass.
So he walks to the back. He opens the flap. He says, "Jill,
Right.
I'm going to need you to run down the road. And we are going to try and fight these men off for you. If we're successful, we'll meet up with you. If we're not, then you come back for the wagon when they're gone." She thinks about it and says, "Well, it would really help if we could get these manacles off." Now, Circe thinks about this for a minute. he did take the keys from the guard when he was searching him. But he's not sure if this is a great idea. After all, she was locked up, and she is an admitted thief.
She's a thief and a prison also.
She is a thief and a prisoner. She was caught being a thief, so
Aren't they the same thing?
maybe she's not that great at a thief.
No.
Terrible thief.
So anywho, so Circe thinks about it. He doesn't have much time, and he says, "Fine, come here." Reaches in his pocket, grabs the keys, unlocks Jill's handcuffs, and they drop to the floor of the wagon. She says, "I think I have another plan. Hand me over,
Run.
and then I will distract them, and you can trample them with the horses." Circe thinks to himself and says, "Well, it's going to risk the horses. Not sure we want to do that. Are you sure that's a good idea?" She thinks about it and says, "I'm not sure that we have any other hope. I could try and run into the woods. They're going to run after us."
Just run.
Now, Jake has been hearing all this. Jack.
Yeah.
So
Where's
Jack has been
Jake
hearing.
coming from?
Yeah. So Jack's been hearing all this, and he says, "Guys, they're getting a little restless. You better hurry up back there. They're not going to wait forever."
That's true.
So they decide to go with their plan. She jumps down. She starts walking around the front. And just as she makes it to the front of the wagon, she jumps on the front of the wagon and tells Jack to start the horses.
To start running.
Quickly, the lead bandit that was in the middle of the road jumps to the side and rolls out of the way of the horses.
Yeah, I know.
The other 5 bandits were already on the sides of the roads, so they're out of the way. The wagon wheels bounce and toss down the road as they bolt away from the bandits.
Uh-oh, get yours.
But
The plan didn't work.
the bandits have horses of their own,
Uh-oh, get
and
yours.
they give chase. The wagon bouncing down the road, Circe in the back, being thrown about to and fro. Jack and Jill in the front.
Isn't he the big guy?
He is the big guy.
That means he would just go through the fabric they use.
Well, he's mostly being bounced around on the ground. So,
Launched around the wagon.
Circe looks out behind them and
Mighty
sees
wagon.
6 horsebacked men chasing after them. And he wonders to himself just exactly how useful this thief was and how valuable she was. Apparently she stole something of great interest to them.
But they want to kill her for it.
So, as he starts reconsidering his situation, he moves to the front of the wagon and says, "Jill, what exactly did you do to make these men so mad at you?"
Wait, but you didn't steal anything.
And she says, "Well, they had a particular map that I got my hands on."
That's what she knows everywhere.
Is
Is
the
the
map
map
in
in
her
her
head?
head?
That makes more
Is the map
sense.
in her head?
Circe says, "What does this map lead to?" And she
Things.
says, "Well, as far as I can tell, it was dropped from an army that came through here years ago. And it leads back to a wizard's tower."
But that's good.
Circe hears this and decides that this is his best chance for getting back to his daughter. So he starts looking through the things in the back, realizing that some of them are tools. He's got wrenches, hammers, screwdrivers,
Start throwing these things at them.
and he does. He starts throwing them at the men on horseback.
And the first thing that I thought when I saw 6 horses running at them, I'm like, Yo, where's that crossbow?
And they didn't pick that up.
You got a bolt in your bag.
No, they took that out. They took that out.
Okay, let's just load this up.
So, he starts throwing the hammers and starts throwing the screwdrivers,
Crossbows.
starts throwing the wrenches.
Can they throw horse
The
backs?
crossbow.
He hits one right in the face. And it
I
slumps
said him
over,
in the face.
slumps over, and falls off his horse, leaving,
Oh.
leaving 5 left.
But aren't the horses like speeding?
Yes.
Yes, they're going over the speed limit.
Did it hit the horse?
And that is
Did
where
it
we're
hit the
gonna.
horse too?
And that is where we're gonna stop it. In the middle of our chase.
Bye.
Okay.
Till tomorrow.